Hi everyone, it's Guillaume from Startup Basecamp. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. During the show, you will have the opportunity to meet the best climate tech founders, investors, and experts from both Silicon Valley and around the globe. They will share with you their stories and personal journeys into this growing and exciting industry, giving you some insight into the ecosystems that help you to take part in the fight against climate change and benefit from the opportunities it can represent. The podcast is divided in two small interviews. During the first part, you will get to know our speakers, their perspectives on the climate crisis and how climate tech is changing the game. The second part of the discussion will be for members of our community who will learn the speakers' secret sauce on how to and share with you their unique expertise on topics such as fundraising, management, strategy, and so on, to help you to become a better leader in your field. So before we start, I would like to quickly share what we are doing at Startup Basecamp to support climate tech founders in accessing resources and gaining visibility with investors they seek. Our initiatives include a membership-based community platform offering access to a dedicated Slack group with a growing number of founders, experts, and investors from around the world, and a series of exclusive content such as interviews, weekly job listings, events, and our quarterly online pitch of night opportunity. But more than a place where you can learn, exchange, and grow, we are building a matchmaking service to facilitate connections between our members and top investors and experts in the field. And soon, alongside with other top investors, we will be launching a small fund to co-invest in the growth and acceleration of our members. Finally, all of this is possible because of your support and donations. We are a small self-funded team, and we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. So please share one episode with a friend and subscribe to the channels. As an added bonus, we will plant a tree for each of our subscribers each time we reach 1,000 new fans or donors. Do not hesitate to connect with me via social media or email guillaume@startupbasecamp. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope to get in touch with you soon. And now, let's go for the show. Hi everyone, in today's episode we're speaking with Ben Kortlang, partner at G2VP. G2 Venture Partners is a venture and growth firm focused on emerging technologies driving sustainable transformation across traditional industries. The firm focuses on supporting entrepreneurs at the growth stage who are unlocking new paths to environmentally and socially responsible economic growth. I was excited to have Ben on the show, a self-described Aussie forced environmentalist who grew up surrounded by nature and no electricity in the Australian bush. He has spent his last 20 years proving that companies could be profitable and sustainable in business to win big. Prior to starting G2VP, Ben spent 7 years at Goldman Sachs and then joined the Silicon Valley VC ecosystem in 2008 with Kleiner Perkins, where he started the Green Growth Fund focused on growth stage sustainable industrial technology companies until 2020. In this episode, Ben will share his view of the US climate tech ecosystem, the fundamentals that drive the market today compared to the early days of the clean tech era 1.0, and the US advantages or weaknesses compared to the EU and the rest of the world. Then, he will discuss the framework G2VP developed to back winning growth stage companies in sustainable industrial tech and how they support their growth with their G2VP growth toolkit. Together, we will go on to explore the climate tech sectors with promising impact, cash return, and the areas he believes have exciting potential for investments, growth, and impact. Afterward, Ben will share his view on the climate crisis today, why all the nature-based and tech solutions are important to solve the climate crisis, and how you can be involved with G2VP today. The second part of the show, Ben will give the secret sauce for founders looking to pitch to investors successfully and share the key metrics investors are looking for while making their investment decisions. Lastly, Ben will cover how he tackles challenges to maintain a healthy work-life balance and share a few inspiring reads for climate tech founders. Ben, welcome to the show. Hi Ben, welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm super happy to have you here with us today. Again, an incredible man who is moving the needle towards a better and cleaner world. So I believe it's going to be a great opportunity to hear your story and get up to speed on what you guys are looking at with G2VP. Sorry about that. So welcome to the show.
Great, thanks for having me.
So before we start, that's our tradition now. Could you please give us a 30-second introduction about G2VP?
Right, G2VP invests at the intersection of technology and industry. We back growth stage companies that are bringing sustainability technology to the industrial space. We typically lead Series B or Series C investments in companies that are winning, that are growing rapidly, and trying to address the industrial space using sustainability technology.
So let's start from the top. Can you tell us a bit more about your personal story and background? What are you passionate about? I mean, what do you do besides working on supporting and investing in founders? What makes you feel inspired or like your best self? As I like to ask, who's Ben?
Great question. So I'm from Australia originally. I grew up in the bush in Tasmania, in a house that was completely off the grid, no electricity, no water, no telephone. My parents were environmentalists right from the start. We were forced environmentalists back then because we didn't have electricity, so we had to run our lights and our radio off the car battery, which meant that we liked to park our car on a hill so that every morning when we needed to start it, we could roll start the car and get going. That start as forced environmentalists and living in nature really got me started with my interest in environment and sustainability. I obviously left there, went to school, started my career in management consulting, and came to the US for business school with the original intention of going back home to Australia. Met a girl, we've now been married 20 years this year, which is part of the reason I ended up staying here. And our first conversation ever was an argument about, this is my first conversation with my wife ever, was an argument about whether it was more important to be profitable or sustainable in business. And obviously through the rest of my career, I have concluded that you need to be both. So that was really some of the roots of my sustainability journey. I've now been here in the US for about half of my life and have been thrilled and blessed to be a part of an amazing ecosystem here in Silicon Valley and have a great family life with my wife and two daughters, and I'm enjoying pursuing sustainability both personally and professionally.
So you mentioned a little bit about your journey from Australia and then the US and then this beautiful encounter of your wife. But tell us a bit more about this, those different like work and life experience prior G2VP. I mean, I saw that by reading your bio that you worked for Goldman and then you were like a senior partner at Kleiner Perkins. I mean, what did you learn during that professional journey, I would say, that gave you an edge to start the firm?
Yeah, so at Goldman, I was there for 8 years, 4 years doing investment banking, where I got to sit in the boardroom and see the biggest investment decisions and strategy decisions and M&A decisions that companies would make. Then I moved to the principal investing side, where I was doing growth equity investing across a range of industries, got broad perspective about how businesses succeed and grow as an investor. Then stumbled into alternative energy in 2005. This is 17 years ago, just when wind and solar were starting to take off, invested in a set of companies that were making solar panels or deploying them or making or deploying wind turbines, which was a tremendous run at the start of the climate tech journey for the US and Europe. Then I came out here to Silicon Valley to Kleiner Perkins to start a fund called the Green Growth Fund. And the original idea of the Green Growth Fund was to focus on energy and invest in the most promising venture-backed startups in the space. what we learned during that era of sustainability investing for Silicon Valley is that investing in innovating in fundamental physics and chemistry and biology is a really tough space for venture. It takes a lot of time, a lot of capital. There's a lot of risks to bust into the industries that they were trying to disrupt. And so we broadened our strategy subsequent to that initial start of the Green Growth Fund to broader sustainable industrial tech, and learned that you really want to partner with the incumbent industries, not try to disrupt them. You want to back entrepreneurs and businesses that are already winning rather than ones that are trying to come up with some new physics or chemistry or biology innovation. And that's how we evolved the strategy that G2 has been pursuing, or our team has been pursuing now for over a decade, that we brought with us to G2, to back those winning companies that are partnering with incumbents to make the industrial space more sustainable.
So before we jump into the genesis of G2VP and we go too deep on that, I'd like to just ask you this question, and often, it's always interesting to hear from our guest speakers, if they had like any aha moment that was kind of like the driver for them to jump in the clean tech world or climate tech world, for the ones who just jump on it. Do you recall any of them, or can you define any one of, as such?
Yeah, so when I was at Goldman Sachs in 2006, we backed a company called SunEdison that I joined the board of, with a brilliant set of entrepreneurs, Jigar Shah, Brian Robertson, a set of others, who were bringing their finance and business expertise to changing the world of solar by making it easy for commercial customers to buy rooftop solar in a PPA model. It was at that moment when I realized, as a financial investor and someone with broad finance experience, that I could have a direct impact by enabling those types of businesses to succeed, and that intersection of sustainability and investing really was happening in the financial world and was accessible to me. So I decided to devote the rest of my career to sustainability investing at that time. We also made billions of dollars investing in that first wave of investing when I was at Goldman in a very short period of time, which made me realize that the opportunity is enormous. This opportunity of transforming the way the world does business will be the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetime. I probably couldn't have articulated it quite as succinctly back then, but I did make an explicit decision to devote the rest of my career to investing in the sustainability space at that time.
Let's zoom out a little bit and take a step back at the climate tech ecosystem today in the US. I mean, obviously you're part of the first clean tech success, but also bubble that burst. You saw all of them today. I mean, you saw all of them that happened. So what are the fundamentals that make the market more relevant than ever today compared to that time?
So the consumer, business, government, regulatory demand for climate solutions is much greater than it has ever been before. When I started in this space and when I joined Kleiner, that was a time of great hope. Al Gore had just published The Inconvenient Truth. There seemed to be some momentum, some real momentum for climate, but it wasn't as broad-based and fundamental as it is today. Every person is feeling the effects of climate change in one way or another. Businesses are realizing they need to change the way they do business. The world has agreed to reduce its climate emissions by 2030, by 2050, to stave off the increasing temperatures and climate change. So those fundamental groundswells of activity are much stronger now than they ever were before. It's not an optional thing. It's not just one side of the political spectrum. The world has realized it needs to act. And those tailwinds make the businesses that we're investing in more successful. It means that they're swimming downstream rather than swimming upstream. And that will create great investment opportunities. It'll create great returns and more entrepreneurs coming into the space.
So do you see like in all of that like some sectors in the traditional industry that are the most impacted and in a way in need of change for their survival? Uh, do you see like any of them that are really like where there's the most activity needed? Or
Well,
the most change?
clearly, energy is where this started. When I started investing in this space in 2005, roughly 10% of new power plant additions in the US were renewables. Now, close to 90% of new power plant additions in the US are renewables. Amazingly, we are at the point where it makes economic sense to rip out a fully depreciated coal plant and replace it with solar, which was unimaginable 17 years ago. That is now the reality today. And it's been beyond what anyone could have guessed back in 2005. Having said that, we're still more than 90% of the world's energy consumption is fossil fuels. So we're still just getting started, even though that's a tremendous amount of progress. Still a long way to go in energy, but I'd say it's the furthest along. Next is transportation. The electrification of transportation is an incredible economic opportunity. And you look at the success that Tesla has had and all of the startups that are following them, as well as the incumbents. Again, we're just getting started. A small single-digit percentage of cars are electric vehicles today. So tons of electrification still to happen. Logistics, probably next, where you have very inefficient push-based logistics systems that need to be switched to smart point-to-point systems. Agriculture is probably next after that, where you have, again, a very inefficient push supply chain system, lots of waste, lots of inefficiency, lots of steps in the value chain. Technology can be applied to make that more efficient and reduce waste and do more with less.
So, do you believe that for on the US side, I mean, are we at the forefront compared to the EU or the rest of the world? I mean, what are the US advantages or weaknesses to decarbonize the economy? Anything that you see is blocking? Maybe a lack of regulation, lack of fundings or technology available?
So I think from a technology standpoint, we've continued to see tremendous technology development coming out of the US and still centered around Silicon Valley. We invest globally and we have portfolio companies everywhere, but there's still a tremendous amount of innovation coming here from Silicon Valley. And the US business community is willing to adopt new technologies and startups very aggressively, which is great. I think from the regulatory and consumer sentiment side, the US is actually at a disadvantage in some ways. The polarization of the political system in the US has made it harder to get real action on climate. And then the polarization of the political system has also caused some subset of the population to not be behind climate change. This really should be a universal push. And I think it is more so in Europe, where you have more forward-leaning on regulation and more forward-leaning from the consumer standpoint. So what we may see is some businesses emerging in the US and evolving to Europe over time as they grow and address a more friendly environment.
So, according to you, what makes you think? And I was reading on your website as part of your thesis. Like, what makes you think that economic growth is compatible with sustainability and reducing global emissions in a way? I mean, we often hear that the only way to go might be the degrowth.
So we believe that the future of the world is doing more with less. If you look back over the industrial era, the world has gotten good at extracting hydrocarbons from the ground, burning them, and to turn them into energy and using that to fuel economic growth. We believe that the future will be continued growth with reduced reduced environmental footprint, and the way to do that is to use technology to enable industry to do more with less. We don't think that this is a choice that has to be made. Do you grow or do you reduce emissions? We believe that you can do both, and you've seen that happen in the energy space, as I was describing earlier. We've been able to continue to deploy new energy while reducing our environmental footprint. We're seeing it happen in the industrial space, where energy efficiency is allowing businesses to become more economically profitable while reducing their energy footprint, environmental footprint, and resource consumption. We think that's the role of technology and the role of our firm to identify those technologies that are helping the world do more with less.
So, with the goal in mind to keep, this 1.5 degrees Celsius overall temperature increase by 2050, which is, according to you, the proportion between tech versus nature-based solutions that needs to be implemented, and why do you believe it's important to push maybe both types of the solution or only one spectrum of the equation?
We need to do everything we can, and we are in the greatest fight that modern humans have ever encountered to solve this climate challenge. So we need to do everything. I believe that technology will be the most important aspect of solving this problem. We've seen what humanity can do when it puts its mind to using technology to solve problems. We have the technology to solve roughly half of the emissions problem that we need to address by 2050. It's really about applying those technologies to the industrial use cases that will allow us to continue to grow and reduce the emissions footprint. So we're very, very focused on technology as the solution to this problem.
Mm-hmm. And do you see, like, to deploy at scale those technologies as you mentioned, and those solutions that, as you mentioned, are existing today? What is blocking the full scale deployment of that? I mean, we all know that 2050 is around the corner, and it takes time. So do you see any blocking points that should be unlocked before this full rollout?
So there's the industrial blocking points, which are incumbents are slow to move, and they only, in some cases, only move when they have to, when there's a regulatory change or some sort of a requirement that causes them to move. There are some notable counter examples to that, and I think those will turn out to be the most successful companies, the ones that are forward leaning on sustainability and climate. A great example is Ørsted they're in Europe, while the European utility sector was decimated by this shift to renewables. They actually leaned in on it and have been one of the highest performing companies. They've been a great partner of ours and a tremendously visionary company. The other side of it is the blockages on the regulatory side. And again, it may be politically unpopular to put a tax on carbon, or to put a price on carbon, or to tax gasoline, or to use taxes and incentives to cause the economy to do the things that it needs to do, but it has to be done, and it will be done. The question is how quickly, how aggressively can we do it? If you wind the clock back to, again, when I started in this space in 2005, if you'd asked me, will there be a real price on carbon, a substantive price on carbon by 2022, I would say absolutely no question. I would have said it would have happened by 2012. And it really still isn't in place in a large scale, which is a failure of the world's political system. It needs to be done. It needs to be done quickly. And we're not talking about $20 a ton carbon. The real cost of carbon is multiples of that.
Yeah. So let's go. Thank you so much for sharing this, macro overview of the general context that we are all evolving into. So let's go now back into the specifics of G2VP, if you're okay with me. So can you let us know more about, the story, the genesis of it? What was the initial gap that you guys saw that in a way led to the thesis behind G2VP?
Yeah. So as I described earlier, I started investing in this space at Goldman Sachs back in 2005. After investing there for a few years, and as I mentioned, the timing of that was perfect. I came out here to Silicon Valley to form the Green Growth Fund in 2008. That was $1 billion fund focused on growth stage clean tech. And that was at a time when Silicon Valley was deploying maybe a quarter to a third of its venture stage capital into clean tech. So it was an exciting time for sustainability investing. We started investing, as I mentioned, in venture-backed startups in the space, focusing largely on energy, and then over time broadened that to truly growth stage companies that were already winning in their sectors across the sustainable industrial tech space. And that worked really well. While Silicon Valley was not succeeding, or at least it thought it wasn't succeeding at clean tech investing in the venture stage, what we were doing in the Green Growth Fund was working extremely well, backing these winning companies in the sustainable industrial tech space. By the time we got to the end of the Green Growth Fund, it was very clear that Silicon Valley had run screaming from the sustainability tech space, but what we were doing was working. And so we spun out and formed G2 to continue focusing on growth stage sustainable industrial tech. I have to give Kleiner a lot of credit for continuing to support us while almost every other venture capital firm left the sustainability space back in 2012 to 2014. Kleiner continued to support us. We continue to work with them on the remaining Green Growth Fund companies, and that's been a great relationship. It was brave for us to form a climate-based fund back in 2017. It wasn't popular back then, but with that body of knowledge and experience and all of the network that we'd built over the time, we knew that the problems were only going to continue to get larger. The economic opportunity was huge, and so we zigged when others zagged, and we formed G2 back in 2017 with a $350 million $350 million Fund 1. We've since raised a $500 million Fund 2, and we're deploying that alongside an opportunity fund. So we have about $1 billion of capital under management. We've invested in about 30 companies now between those funds.
So what do you offer to founders you invest in? I mean, what are the challenges that you see that are specific to them at that growth stage?
So we have a unique perspective on this space. We have seen all of the mistakes of the Clean Tech 1.0 era. We've seen companies that have tried and failed to penetrate these industrial spaces. We've built a deep industrial network with strategics and incumbents in these spaces that we use to help these companies grow. And we built a growth stage toolkit where essentially we've taken the 100 plus companies that we've been involved with, growing from 10 million of revenue to 100 million plus and exit, and bringing all of the lessons and skills and things that we've learned along the way into this growth stage toolkit, which we apply to these companies to help them succeed. Many of the challenges are the same in companies that are growing across those stages, and so we try to bring those to bear in helping our companies not have to learn the same lessons over and over again that other ones have.
So out of those 30 investments that you mentioned previously, can you give us maybe one or two examples of those previous investments and what makes them special? Was it like the team, the market, the tech, and how do you source those founders and teams? I mean, like, who should come to pitch you?
Let me start with the second one. Any company, so our focus is investing in companies that are winning in the sustainable industrial tech sector that have great unit economics. So companies, they can come and get to know us before they're already winning, which usually means they've got millions of dollars of revenue, they've got customers who can tell us that they're awesome, that they've got unit economics that work. They can come to get to know us before then, but we're not going to invest before they achieve those things. And so they can start to build the relationship, but we won't invest until they've achieved those things. How do we find them? Our core methodology is doing these deep dives, sector deep dives, where we will dig into a space. We might spend months talking to all of the companies in the space, interviewing customers, regulators, suppliers, technology experts, and forming a thesis on the space, which can lead to an investment at that time, or it can lead to us waiting and knowing exactly what we're looking for in the future. Those deep dives are the core of our methodology and the core of our work, and they allow us to have a unique perspective. When we see the right company in the space, because of all of that work, we can jump on it, and we know exactly what to invest in. Your second question was around some of our historical investments and why we invested in them. Let me take you back to our Kleiner portfolio. We invested in a company called Enphase in 2015. Enphase makes microinverters which turn DC electricity into AC electricity for rooftop solar. We did a deep dive in that area and discovered that even though inverters themselves seemed like a commoditized technology, Enphase's unique value proposition allowed you to deploy the solar system much more easily and quickly. You could put panels everywhere on any facing roof. You didn't have to worry about shading. You didn't have to worry about stringing. So it was a much easier value proposition for deployment. And then we looked at their technology roadmap and concluded that this could be the most important company in the future of residential energy, because they could form their own microgrids, enabling these solar systems to work when the grid was out. The thing that most people don't realize about solar is when the grid goes down, your solar system goes off. That's not true of Enphase. You can continue to run your solar system when the grid's off. So we invested at a $200-something million valuation back in 2010. I joined the board. The company, like most companies, went through some challenges along the way, and while the other investors in the company all left the board and went on and sold their shares and did other things, I stuck with it. We had to orchestrate a rescue financing in 2016, make team changes, make some strategy changes. But now the company is worth $27 billion today. It's the most valuable solar company in the world. I'm still on the board after 12 years. This is an incredibly important and valuable company in the future of residential energy.
Sorry, go ahead.
I can talk about more companies in our portfolio. I could consume a lot of time doing that, but you can tell me.
But you told me that you have a hard stop, so I don't want to burn all of your bullets. But no, I like to just go back a little bit to you mentioned that you guys are doing deep dives into sector specific. So according to you, like which sectors, it depends how is the most promising for you today in terms of like what I called ICR, impact cash return. I mean, meaning building impactful companies while creating highly profitable business. Do you see any underdogs, subsectors, or area that you are most excited about it for now?
So we're doing many of these deep dives all the time, and I can't pick one and say this is the one. Usually what happens is we'll see some nugget of information or insight that causes us to get excited about where the business and environmental opportunity in the area. And it could be some weird subsegment of an industry. So for example, we did a deep dive about what do you do with flared gas? So these gas flares that come from oil fields, they're an environmental disaster, methane escaping into the atmosphere. How do you solve that problem economically to stop that gas from escaping? So we're digging into that area, and we're seeing some really interesting potential opportunities in that area. What do you do with food waste in urban environments so that you're not just landfilling it? How do you economically deal with that? Is it through a digestion facility? Do you do one of these facilities where you grow black fly larvae to turn the food waste into fertilizer and into protein for animal food? Do you pursue a recycling type strategy with that, a circular economy type strategy to go back into growing? So those areas, we will find areas that are where there might be an intersection between economic opportunity and environmental impact and pursue those. There are so many that it's hard for me to just pick one and say this is the one we're most excited about.
No, definitely, but always good to hear, for the other investors and LPs listening to the show to see like, those guys are looking at that might be interesting, or maybe some founders are like, yeah, we're doing something that might be interesting for them in the future. So taking the opposite side, I mean, out of all the pitches that you hear, and it's a little bit different in your case because you guys are already picking like some what you mentioned winner in their field, but which are the solution you believe makes like in a way zero sense whatsoever and sound to be a waste of time and resource or maybe like even greenwashing? Do you have maybe an example without naming any companies?
We're quite skeptical on the hydrogen space. This is an area that has regained a lot of attention over the last year or two after it had a lot of attention back in 2005 to 2007, and then it sort of disappeared, and now it's coming back. We're quite skeptical about that space because it is largely uneconomic to generate the hydrogen, move it to where it is needed, and then build out the infrastructure for using it. So that's an area that we're skeptical on. Of course, we are data-driven decision makers at our core. So if someone has that great, right hydrogen idea, then we will listen and happily be proven wrong. But we're quite skeptical on that space as an example of one that's quite hot right now.
So going back to impact, like how do you guys measure impact? I mean, some other funds often that I see, like they have those like mention like we invest in 100 gigaton potential idea, or do you have like any specific criteria or specific process framework? Do you rely maybe on scientists or experts to validate that tech or the impact potential, or maybe some CO2 impact or social impact? Is any like impact, I would say, cursor that you guys are looking at for your investments?
Yeah, so we evaluate every investment opportunity on a specific impact framework. Because we're looking at a range of different companies, there's no single framework that works for every company. Some are doing very, very direct climate impact things. Others are doing more indirect. And so what we will do is start with the company's view on their sustainability impact. If they don't have a view, we probably won't invest. If they do have a view, we then evaluate that against the UN sustainability goals, evaluate where it fits on both an environmental impact axis and an other impact axis, which can be a whole range of different things. And then we will decide whether it meets our criteria in terms of, is it having a significant positive impact? Because the businesses we're investing in at this intersection of environmental impact and economic attractiveness might have a range of different environmental characteristics, what we end up with is a portfolio approach. Some are extremely directly positive, making electric buses, deploying solar panels, helping consumers buy green energy. Some are more second order effects, more efficient supply chains, dematerializing circular economy, but the whole portfolio in aggregate is extremely climate positive.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's always a little bit like the difficult part. We want to allocate capital towards like impactful companies, but at the same time, it's always like where do we put the stop or go, and even harder, I guess, in the the early stage, which is not too much your case. So, what's next for G2VP, guys?
What's next? More of the same. We've been now successfully investing in winning companies in growth stage climate tech for over a decade as a complete team. We're excited about the flow of opportunities we're seeing. We're seeing more than we've ever seen before. Companies and entrepreneurs that are succeeding in addressing the climate challenge and doing it in an economically attractive way. We've invested at our fastest pace ever over the last year. We've been doing close to one investment a month, which is unprecedented for us. And we're excited about the companies we're backing across a range of different sectors addressing the climate space.
So any, you guys are not looking at like, I would say a little bit lower, growth level, meaning like maybe the seed stage or like Series A. Is that something that you guys are looking in the future, or not at all? You prefer to be
not at this point. We've built a really successful methodology around identifying these winning companies. So, some of them can be Series A companies. It's a rare Series A, but we don't care so much about the letter of the round. What we care about is the company in revenue? Do they have product market fit? Have they demonstrated that their unit economics are great? And can we call the customers and have the customers tell us, this is the one, this company's winning? And if they meet those criteria, regardless of what letter the round is, we will look at investing.
So, last question to conclude this first part of the interview. We'd like to ask. So, what's your personal view on the climate crisis today? Are we doomed? What would you say to people who feel demoralized by all the terrible and already visible consequences of climate change?
We have the technology to win this fight. We don't necessarily have the will to deploy that technology to win the fight right now. So I believe we will ultimately win, but we will suffer some, as with many things in humanity, we'll have to suffer some consequences to build the will to deploy that technology and deploy the resources to win the fight. So I will be surprised if we muster the will to meet 1.5 degrees C, but I'm sure that we can beat the really catastrophic multiple degrees C climate impact that would be really catastrophic to the world's economic and ecosystems.
So do you believe that this will in a world after COVID, as we had, and now this international tension with in Ukraine, with Russia, which is especially on the European side, providing more than 40% of natural gas resource. So do you feel that this will is in a way being put a little bit on the side because now we are starting to restart old cold energy plants just because of we need to find alternative to that? Or do you feel it could be in the midterm something very positive for the ecosystem?
I think the issue of reliance on other countries' energy resources is really going to cause the world to accelerate deployment of renewables and accelerate efficiency efforts. So and it's not just energy, it's all natural resources. You're buying your rare earths from China, you're buying your gas from Russia, you're buying your coal from Russia. There are solutions to these which today might feel like they're more expensive or they're a deployment of capital that isn't the number one priority for a country. But if you think about the long run, then getting off reliance on those natural resources will be the path forward. And so I think ultimately it will end up accelerating the solution. And I think about going back to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars of the US. If the US had spent the $2 trillion that it spent on those wars just building out energy resources and sustainability, we wouldn't need foreign oil. And so we'd be free of that problem entirely. I think the same thing will happen now as you think about generally reliance on other countries' natural resources, and it'll ultimately accelerate the solutions.
So how can the community of investors, LPs, founders listening to the show can help you guys?
Well, the entrepreneurs and founders and companies in the space can come to us and pitch their businesses, and we can invest in the best ones and help accelerate their growth. LPs, we will be raising our next fund in early 2023. We'd be happy to talk to new LPs who are mission driven and want to have an impact as well as earn top tier returns. And generally the type of thing that you're doing here to publicize the issues of climate and bring them to the forefront of the world's consciousness, we think is really important as well, because it'll ultimately create those tailwinds that allow businesses, regulators, and consumers to build the will to address the problems.
So any question that I should have asked and I didn't for this first part of the show?
No, I think you covered you covered a lot of good ground there.
Ben, thank you so much for spending the time with us, for your incredible insights as well. I'm so excited to see so many interesting and brilliant people like you, working hard to support founders towards developing their company for a better world. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Hi, it's Guillaume again. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I said, do not hesitate to share an episode with a friend. Also, if you value the work we do for the climate tech ecosystem, here is how you can contribute to it. Today, I'm asking for your support and a donation or sponsorship to make the work of our self-funded team more viable. Even a small contribution means a lot to us. In any case, I will invite you to subscribe to our channels and visit our website startupbasecamp.org to discover more episodes like this one. And get your membership to access all our members' exclusive content. So remember, all of this is possible because of your support and donation. And we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. Let's keep in touch, and I hope you will enjoy our next show with us.